Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to think about your daily internet habits for just a second. You open up a browser, type out a half-formed question, you get your answer in a literal millisecond, and you close the tab. If it takes more than a second, you probably get a little annoyed, right? But notice something. No bill ever arrives in the mail for this. There's no subscription reminder, no payment screen. It's just instant results, completely free, and available to anyone, anywhere with an internet connection. And Google does this roughly 8 billion times every single day. But here is the massive puzzle we're going to solve today. Running the infrastructure behind those 8 billion daily searches, the massive server farms, the underwater cables, the elite engineers, the electricity, it costs tens of billions of dollars every year. Usually, companies that spend that kind of cash and charge their primary users absolutely nothing, well, they don't survive, let alone become one of the most powerful economic engines in human history.
So, we really have to ask our core question for today. Why does Google cost nothing? How does that actually work? Well, the answer is that the real business powering this massive machine is almost entirely invisible to the people who use it the most. It operates completely silently, hidden in the literal milliseconds between your keystroke and the moment your search results pop up. Basically, what you think you understand about Google and what Google actually is are two completely different things.
And just to put the sheer scale of this invisible machine into perspective for a second, Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, generates a staggering $400 billion a year in revenue. $400 billion. And not a single dollar of that comes from a search subscription. Not 1 cent comes from a premium Gmail plan. The entire machine runs on something else completely, something most of us never even give a second thought to as we go about our day.
To really understand this, we have to realize that Google's whole suite of free products, Search, Gmail, Maps, Docs, they aren't running a charity here. These products are incredibly effective intake funnels. Think back to the late 1990s. Early search engines were pretty terrible, honestly. They just matched keywords, which led to an internet completely filled with useless spam. Then Google came along and introduced the PageRank algorithm. This actually measured a page's trustworthiness based on how many respected sites linked to it. It was a game changer. People flocked to Google because, quite frankly, it just worked better. It built immense trust, but Google never charged a dime for it. They purposefully gave away this extraordinary suite of digital services to billions of people at no cost, specifically to build these massive global intake funnels.
Now, you've probably heard that old saying, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. Well, that actually only gets you halfway there. There's a crucial paradigm shift we need to talk about: the difference between a user and a customer. As a user, you receive incredible, real, functional value. Free search, free email, free navigation. But you are not the buyer. The actual customer is the advertiser. Google essentially just moved the point of monetization. They split the roles completely apart. You, the user, generate a highly valuable resource, and the advertiser pays Google for access to it.
So, what exactly is that resource you're generating? It's called intent-loaded attention. And look, not all attention is created equal. When you're scrolling on social media or binge-watching a show, your attention is pretty passive. You're just absorbing what's there. But when you go to Google and actively type "compare health insurance quotes" or "emergency plumber near me," you are not just browsing. You're declaring an immediate commercial intent. You are literally signaling to the world that you have a problem and you are ready to spend money right now to fix it.
And that difference right there brilliantly illustrates why that specific intent is so incredibly valuable. To put it into perspective, just think about conversion rates. For passive social media advertising, a good conversion rate runs somewhere between 1 and 4%. But on Google Search, it sits at around 7%. That means roughly 1 in 14 clicks turns into an actual real transaction. Advertisers are more than happy to pay an absolute premium because Google sits right at the toll booth of global commerce, capturing the customer at the exact moment of their highest buying intent.
Let's break down step by step how Google actually capitalizes on this. It all happens in a mind-blowing millisecond search journey. First, you type your query. Second, their machine learning models, like their BERT architecture, parse not just the words you typed, but the actual intent behind them. Third, a system called NavBoost steps in and filters billions of candidate pages, using 13 months of real user interaction data to find the absolute highest quality results for you. And finally, if your query has commercial intent, an automated, real-time ad auction fires off. All of this finishes before the page even renders on your screen. It's wild.
And the math behind this invisible auction? It is fascinating. It's known as a generalized second price auction. Now, in a normal auction, if you bid your true maximum budget, you risk overpaying, right? But Google uses this clever 1 cent rule. Imagine you have 3 bidders. Bidder A is willing to pay $1 for your click, bidder B is willing to pay 35 cents, and bidder C will pay 10 cents. Bidder A clearly wins the top spot, but here's the kicker. They don't actually pay $1. They pay exactly 1 cent more than the next highest bid. So bidder A pays just 36 cents. This genius structure incentivizes advertisers to bid their true, honest, maximum value without constantly worrying about being ripped off.
But hold on, Google doesn't just hand the top spot over to whoever has the most money. If they did that, a company with deep pockets could just buy the top spot for a completely irrelevant, spammy ad. And if that happened, you would stop trusting Google and their entire business model would collapse overnight. So the really crucial part is this simple formula. Ad rank equals your bid multiplied by your quality score. Meaning, your position on the page isn't determined by your budget alone, it's heavily weighted by how good your ad actually is.
So how exactly do they measure that quality? Basically, through 3 main factors: your expected click-through rate historically, how relevant your ad is to what the user actually typed, and the quality of the landing page that you send the user to. By factoring all this in, a highly relevant advertiser can actually pay less per click and still beat out a richer but totally irrelevant competitor. Google is basically financially rewarding honest marketing because they know that protecting your trust as a user is quite literally the only way to protect the long-term survival of their ad inventory.
However, let's not forget they are still a heavily profit-driven company. During recent federal antitrust trials, it came to light that Google actually utilized secret auction adjustments. Through internal mechanisms with names like Project Mumbiji and squashing, Google found ways to subtly compress those quality scores or artificially inflate runner-up bids. Through this, they managed to artificially bump up advertiser costs by roughly 5 to 10% above what the natural auction price would have been just to hit their quarterly revenue targets. They calibrated this incredibly carefully too, extracting as much money as physically possible without triggering a mass exodus of advertisers to competitors like Amazon or Meta.
Now, all this is powered by a concept called the data flywheel. Remember NavBoost, that click tracking system we mentioned earlier? It monitors absolutely every interaction. Did you click a link and stay on that page a long time? Great, that's a good click. Did you immediately hit the back button? That's a bad click. Every single query you make is a data point that makes the next query more accurate. More users means more data. More data means better search quality, and better search quality attracts even more users. This continuous loop creates a massive structural advantage that is almost impossible for any new competitor starting from scratch to beat. To protect this massive data advantage, Google went on a serious defensive expansion. They realized early on that computing was inevitably moving to mobile phones. And if Apple or Microsoft owned the phone software, they could just block Google's access to mobile searches overnight. So back in 2005, Google bought Android for $50 million, and they gave it away to phone manufacturers completely for free, with one catch: as long as they made Google Search and Google Chrome the defaults. They essentially took a free operating system and turned it into a global distribution network just to perfectly protect their toll booth. And this dominance extends right into your daily routine through the economics of lock-in. Think about it. Google's products aren't really separate apps. They are one highly integrated ecosystem. Let's say a flight confirmation arrives in your Gmail. It automatically populates into your Google Calendar. Then on the day of your flight, Google Maps triggers a traffic alert telling you exactly when you need to leave for the airport. It is completely effortless and undeniably useful, but it creates massive switching costs for you. If you try to leave for a competitor, that new provider starts with zero intelligence about your habits. It's not really a trap, it's just a very, very comfortable room that gets harder and harder to leave the longer you stay inside.
Google also recognized pretty early on that text search has limits. Sure, it captures immediate intent perfectly, but what about brand building? What about companies wanting to reach people who aren't actively searching for anything yet? Well, that's exactly why they bought YouTube. Today, YouTube generates over $60 billion a year. By sharing revenue with creators, Google brilliantly incentivized the production of endless content, which allowed them to capture massive, passive attention budgets, like traditional TV commercial money, that standard text search could simply never reach.
For decades, this whole machine seemed completely invincible, but today, we are actually starting to see some cracks in the foundation. There are massive, structural threats looming over Google's $400 billion empire, and it all starts with the biggest technological shift of our generation. Generative AI is threatening the very core of this search model. Think about traditional search, filled with those highly profitable ad auctions we just broke down. Now contrast that with conversational AI. If an AI assistant can just directly answer your question, there is no results page. And if there's no results page, there is no ad placement, and there is no auction. The AI threatens to completely bypass the lucrative toll booth Google spent the last 20 years building. And beyond just losing out on that ad placement, AI is astronomically expensive to run.
Generating an AI response consumes roughly 800 times more energy per query than a standard Google search. Because of this, Google's greenhouse gas emissions have actually skyrocketed by 48% between 2019 and 2023, driven primarily by the massive data centers required to process these complex AI queries. To try and recover these enormous costs, Google is now desperately trying to shove their traditional auction advertisements inside AI summary overviews.
Finally, we are officially entering the antitrust era. The regulatory friction against Google is increasing rapidly. In August 2024, a federal judge ruled Google unlawfully maintained a monopoly in general search. By 2025, they were ordered to actually share their precious search index data with competitors. Another ruling targeted their advertising technology, potentially forcing a sale of their ad exchange entirely. And over in Europe, the Digital Markets Act has forced Google to show users browser choice screens, actively dismantling those default distribution agreements we talked about. The legal system is actively attacking the data flywheel.
So the next time you fire up your browser, check your Gmail, or ask your phone for directions, I really want you to remember exactly how this incredible economic operating system functions behind the scenes. The free services you use every day, they were never really free. They were investments. Investments in your attention, your loyalty, and your behavioral data. You are not the customer. You are the product sitting on the shelf. And someone, somewhere, just placed a bid for your attention. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. As generative AI and new regulations continue to totally reshape the internet, who do you think is going to win the bid for your attention next?